Hello and welcome to part 6 of my Kundalini diary. If you haven't seen the other parts of my series yet, please consider watching them first, otherwise this video won't make a lot of sense. Having said that, I think this is going to be one of those videos that won't make a lot of sense even if you have watched my others. I did contemplate omitting some of these entries because some of them are somewhat vague, repetitive and somewhat confusing. Kundalini Awakening. Purging in Limbo. Day 73. All sensations have continued to increase throughout the day. The pressure inside of my crown has continued to build and has been feeling almost unbearable again. After taking care of my day-to-day stuff, I ended up taking myself upstairs and laying down in bed. After laying down, I closed my eyes and attempted to channel the energy throughout my physical body and what I think of as my energy body. After reaching a light trance, I attempted to evenly distribute my awareness and energy, hoping I'd feel some kind of relief, which has worked previously. I hoped that by distributing my awareness, I could shift the majority of my focus away from the crown, and hopefully alleviate some of the pressure I've been experiencing. Thankfully, I was able to relax and started to feel the now familiar sense of acceleration and motion. The pressure also started to recede away from my crown, and I began experiencing something I've never really experienced prior. After the pressure eased away, I started to feel as if my physical body was expanding and growing in size or scale. It almost felt as if I was in the body of a giant. Even though I knew it probably wasn't anything to worry about, I automatically started trying to resist the experience. This served as a reminder that I am still fearful of the unknown. In response to this growing resistance, I felt as if the energy I perceived flowing upwards started to feel more restricted at the crown of my skull. At the same time, I became aware of a block within my sacral chakra. I felt this block physically, and it felt as if I was wearing a tight belt made from a bone-like substance, and this was all across my abdomen. I felt as if this belt was constricting and tightening just beneath my belly button. This sensation was similar to being choked, but instead of my head feeling the pressure, I felt it throughout my whole abdomen. It was more uncomfortable than painful, but it still felt quite disconcerting. I attempted various things to ease and relax the blockage I perceived. When met with these blocks, I always start by attempting to perceive love within the block. If that doesn't help, I try shifting my awareness elsewhere, and if that fails too, I try and understand what the block could be symbolic of, and ask myself questions, such as, am I blocking my own creativity out of fear? Am I still reluctant to commit and blend with this experience? Why do I fear my own experience? Etc. I also try and remind myself of the greater reality of the problem or my situation, and this was an evening update. As I type these words, my nightmare consciousness has returned with a vengeance, and I am once again struggling to remain grounded. I feel as if I am being bombarded by torrents of overwhelming and unfamiliar stimuli. On a positive note, I'm still handling this far better than I did the last time it occurred, which is somewhat reassuring. I know I'm handling it better than I did last time because I am at least not trembling. I am also attempting to just surrender and go with the experience while having faith and confidence in my own abilities. Regardless of how difficult this is for me right now, I am proud of the fact I am not attempting to bury the experience, which is something I tried to do the first time when I experienced nightmare consciousness. But my God, this is incredibly difficult. My perception of reality is warping and shifting. It almost feels as if I have been drugged with psychedelics. Not that I'm hallucinating or anything like that, not visually at least. I don't know how else I can describe this hell-like state. I really do hope I don't end up cracking, because my greatest fear about all of this is the possibility of driving myself insane. I definitely fear shattering my psyche more than I fear death. I'm sure it won't come to that though. I mean, despite all the chaos and turmoil I am currently feeling within, I am still coherent in my thinking, so I don't think anything is being lost or broken. To the contrary, actually, I think I have gained more of myself than I can handle right now. I really do wish I didn't feel so displaced. That's why I refer to this as nightmare consciousness. It's as if I am trapped in a nightmare. And if it wasn't enough to feel as if I'm being bombarded by all this alien stimuli, that I can't interpret or make sense of. It also feels as if everything I have emotionally repressed over the course of my lifetime is seemingly rising to the surface, begging for attention and release. I feel as if I am sat alone in a creaky wooden shed waiting for a tornado to pass by. I am experiencing emotions similar to what one would expect to feel just before a lethal injection is administered. My abdomen feels as if it's on fire, and my appetite has ceased once again. The thought of eating right now actually makes me feel sick. My God, and now I have to go make dinner for my family while still feeling all this. And now this is a later update. My thoughts once again turn towards establishing and strengthening my resolve and trying to build a sense of security. I know it sounds dramatic, but I really do feel as if my foundation is crumbling into the ocean. I am exploring, clarifying and correcting erroneous thoughts and interpretations as they arise in real time. I really am being forced to tap into a strength I never knew existed just to stay afloat. I have made a lot of inner realizations, even in the time it's taken me to write this. I think if I can handle this part of my journey correctly, I should be able to address certain core issues by dealing directly with all the repressed energy now rising to the surface. I wish I could learn how to turn the volume of the experience down while I am struggling in this way, and I have been coming to terms with a lot lately, and I know I still have a lot to learn. Because recently I've been feeling quite judgmental of those around me in silly ways about silly things. For one, I really dislike engaging in this constant small talk. I'm now finding it almost intolerable, and I feel insincere while I feel as if I'm feigning interest. I feel as if I'm holding a puppet up of myself and just doing and saying what is expected of me. I realize by doing this, I am essentially lying to those around me by acting in this way, but at the same time, I do not want to be hurtful to others. Overall, I do recognize the pettiness and judgmental feeling tones rising now are a part of myself that I have previously denied and repressed. I mean, I've never liked small talk or gossip, but regardless of how I've always felt about it, I reluctantly engage in the hope of avoiding awkward silence. But in terms of gossip, I do steer away from that by acknowledging the other party's position and circumstances. I just have no interest in any of it. I would rather big someone up than tear someone down. In terms of my recent grumpiness, at heart I am aware that I don't really mean ill towards those around me. I can always identify the times in which I am unfairly projecting, and I'm working to actively steer away from that too. While processing everything, I am just trying to take it easy. Day 82. My control is improving with each passing day, although I do acknowledge the space I am navigating is just as confusing to me now as it was in the beginning. I entertain many ideas and have many theories, but I still try to avoid concluding anything without having a sense of absolute certainty. I think this is a sensible approach for many reasons. My inner space feels like a blend between my physical body and something else entirely. It feels inside of me, yet the makeup, objects, mechanisms I feel cannot be of the human body in a physical sense, which is confusing, because, as I've said before, I feel this experience more than anything I could ever hope to feel in physical terms. I keep trying to navigate higher through rotating, orbiting biological mechanisms with all manner of strange artifacts and objects still present, huge fleshy lung-like sacs of water contained within more water. It's as if I am navigating around a giant womb or something. One thing I have noted throughout this experience is the fact that, at my core, none of this feels foreign. In meditation, I am beginning to feel the spitting and spattering of fine water droplets raining down on me, similar to what I experienced during the early stages of my Kundalini awakening. Why does this feel so familiar to me? How do I know how to operate within this inner space? I also made a note on some of the other artifacts, objects, textures I perceived in this inner space, and they are quite vague, but this is just what I listed. Imagine an object that feels like the ear of a dog submerged in warm syrup on the floor of whatever space I am navigating. The object feels thin and smooth like some type of rubber. The flexibility and feel is identical to the ear of a dog. I obviously do not think this is actually an ear though. I'm just trying to compare the feel of these inner objects with textures and things I'm familiar with. I perceive something that feels like a bundle of clotted wet cotton. It is extremely fibrous and is attached to what I can only describe as fleshy tissue. There's also a tissue that seemingly curls up whenever my awareness is fixed upon it, and then becomes a solid object like a straw or something. There's also a tissue present that feels so soft it could be mistaken for liquid. I was in two minds whether or not I should include these next entries because they are quite vague and extremely bizarre. I just wanted to, again, note some of the objects that I've perceived within. Day 83. On day 70, I found an object that felt as if it was a plastic bag tethered within a moving stream of energy. I have since become aware of more of these. I have felt 3 externally so far, 1 to the left of my head, 1 just above my head, and 1 to the right. They seem to be located just outside of my body. I may be incorrect about this, however, but this is where I perceive them. Imagine 3 balloons tethered to your head. In structure and feeling they are quite similar to Chinese lanterns, but instead of them feeling as if they're made out of paper, the balloon-like objects feel as if they are composed of a thin plastic material and feel as if they are filled with water instead of air. The texture of these objects is very strange and I have no clue what they are really, which is quite unsettling. What if they're actually supposed to be inside of me and I've just somehow forced them out while struggling to contend with this constant pressure I experience? I have no clue. There seems to be several openings throughout my skull. The openings seem to be able to breathe and contract. Again, I don't understand what they are or what they're for. On a side note, I have also noticed an increase in mucus flowing throughout my nasal passages in response to this work. Well, I hope it's conventional mucus and not cerebrospinal fluid, which is a bit of a fear. I think because of the increased awareness of my physical body and feeling it the way I do now, I might just be becoming more aware of the mucus travelling throughout my nasal passage, which is a bit gross really, but I'd rather it be mucus than brain juice. When the balloon-like objects I feel just outside of me get caught in these openings, it seems to create more pressure. A section of my energy body then starts to feel as if it's composed of a squeaky dry latex, and I perceive a lot of friction and discomfort. No noticeable changes to my awareness or anything else when this occurs, but it isn't a very pleasant feeling, and perhaps this is unrelated. I mean, as far as the mucus goes, perhaps this is unrelated since I do have hay fever, but I'm experiencing random sneezing fits while practicing. Day 84. There's no real pain associated with my energy body or whatever it is I am perceiving. I can feel stretching and pressure during some of my more intensive awareness exercises, but I wouldn't say these sensations resemble physical pain. I don't seem to be able to break anything, so I have relaxed my sense of caution. I've learned I can seemingly reorient the openings I described. The most comfortable location to open and manipulate seems to be the opening I perceive in my face. Think of a motorcycle helmet with a sliding eye shield. When I do this, other balloon-like objects seem to rise out with various other random artifacts. Have you ever seen a single-cell organism die? After the membrane ruptures, the contents of the cell begins to slowly spill out. It actually feels a little bit how that looks, if that makes sense. Again, there's no pain, but I have no clue what I'm doing really. The objects and artifacts that escape seem to be tethered to me in some way, and I realise that I can easily reintegrate them. I think I'm becoming more accustomed now to operating on this level. More objects and artifacts becoming apparent. I imagine the things I feel do have some purpose on an energetic level. I am unsure of what they are. I try and test the artifacts by clutching them with the left hand and allowing energy to flow through into them to see if I notice a change of awareness or a change in literally anything else. I am sorry if some of this sounds confusing to you. Please believe that I also share your confusion. I remember frantically Googling all sorts of different things in relation to Kundalini, hoping to understand this phenomena more, but there's just no results for this, and I am still none the wiser. I will finish this video with a significant dream I had during this interval. The following dream was one of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. In my diary entry I titled the dream Rebirth. The dream started with the understanding that I had recently died. I can't really remember the circumstances surrounding my death, as it didn't seem particularly important. I just knew that I was no longer alive in physical terms. I felt surprisingly calm, even though I was floating just casually around a morgue. The morgue itself seemed to be located in a large room composed of bits and pieces of familiar locations I had known in life. The morgue appeared to be made of glass panels, which reminded me of a greenhouse, yet it also resembled my primary school courtroom, since that was also mostly just glass panels. The vibe was also similar to my old primary school, yet it also seemed to contain familiar elements of where I lived in California. As I floated around this environment trying to make sense of everything, I began to wonder what happened to my body, and as I thought of it, I immediately transported to the tray my body was laying on. I spent a few moments studying the differences in my appearance, especially the discoloration of my skin. Surprisingly, I didn't feel all that disturbed by this. I do remember feeling a sense of intrigue and sentimentality as I reflected over the life I'd just lived. My thoughts soon turned towards my family and friends, and as I thought of them all, I felt as if I established a connection with them and began to feel their experience bleed into my own conscious awareness. I transitioned away from the morgue and found myself hovering in the air above them, and felt overwhelmed by the weight of their suffering and felt powerless, knowing I couldn't really do anything to help or make myself known. I also felt a little frustrated since they were suffering as a result of their misconceptions about death. To them I had ceased to exist. I listened as they spoke to one another. I heard my mum say something like, "Oh, at least he's in a better place now," along with all the other typical things people say after someone passes. But on an emotional level, in spite of their words, they feared I no longer existed, which was the major underlying reason why they were suffering. I then attempted to reach out to them, but in their grief, they were completely deaf. I felt absolutely desperate to assure them that I still existed. So I began to think about the different ways I could reach out and communicate, move an object, project my energy towards them, wait until they're in a sleep state. Well, no, that would be too sensible. True to form, I decided that I would attempt to reanimate my corpse, since I somehow knew they'd be paying my body a visit. Now there's a little bit missing after this point, despite how quickly I tried to note the dream after waking up. But the next thing I remember, I'm stood over my body and realised that it had been moved to a different room, which seemed to be a combination of two other familiar locations. One half of the room resembled my Year 6 classroom, the other half resembled my English classroom from high school, and once again seemed to have the overall vibe of where I was living in California. It was really bizarre. In this classroom, there seemed to be quite a lot of people, and I recognised most of them. Neighbours, old classmates, and some random acquaintances I had all but forgotten. My body was laying on a table and was covered with a white sheet among stacks of chairs. Among stacks of chairs, tables, and other random pieces of classroom furniture. Everything seemed to have been stacked and moved to the back of the classroom to create space for everyone in the room, and my body was just lying there among the furniture. After watching everyone go about their business, I remembered why I was there and decided I'd try and re-enter my body. I aligned my form with the dead body and began to focus on its physical composition. It was like laying inside a cold block of concrete. I instinctively began trying to slow my frequency to match that of my physical body, and after a short period of time, I began to feel a pulsing, electrical sensation spread throughout my stomach area. The electrical sensation began to spread, encompassing more and more of my physical body. To my surprise, I began to feel something that resembled regular touch data, followed by a biting pain in my right hand, which is kind of how I imagine frostbite to feel. This wasn't very pleasant, but I was happy knowing that I might actually be able to manipulate my body and assure my family should they come to visit. The painful sensations continued to spread until the biting pain encompassed my whole body. At this point, I attempted to move my finger and was surprised to feel a slight twitch. This is when I knew I'd definitely be able to at least let my family know that I was alright and that I had survived. I was overjoyed by this in the dream and began to wonder just how far I could actually take it. While still immersed in attempting to reassociate with my body, 2 people from the morgue entered the room hoping to dissect my body and wasted no time in readying their tools. I started to panic and attempted to accelerate this reconnection. My slight movements alerted them and they observed this in horror. I attempted to speak but still could not. I also attempted to open my physical eyes but couldn't do that either. All I could do was twitch random parts of my body, like my fingers and toes. The morticians and everyone else ran out of the room in terror, leaving me to continue. Time passed and I eventually found that I was able to partially open my eyes, but my left eye felt as if it had been rendered completely useless. My left eye seemed to be bulging out of my eye socket, and its shape was completely distorted. To my surprise, I found that I could actually use my right eye, although I couldn't see anything beyond light and shadow. I wasn't alarmed by this and took for granted that my eyes and body would continue to regenerate. As I prepared to take my first breath, my body began to tremble, which lessened the physical rigidity of my body. The discomfort within my body continued to intensify and I found myself burning from head to toe with the cold and tissue damage. I took my first breath and realized the people in the classroom had reappeared and were arguing amongst themselves. My family also seemed to be there, but they seemed despondent, appearing numb, indifferent, and motionless as if they were statues. Feeling short of time, I attempted to alert my family and let them know. I came back just to let them know that there was nothing to worry about and that I never ceased to be. More people entered the room and began to congregate around the table that I was still laying on. I tried to assure them too about consciousness persisting after death and that nothing is ever truly lost. While this was happening and while I was speaking, I felt completely aligned with my higher self and was able to speak from my heart in a way I've never been able to in life. I was then interrupted by the mortician and his assistant who returned wanting to carry out whatever procedure they felt they needed to carry out. With each passing second, I realized my body was operating as it had in life and knew I could probably just stay in my body and continue living. Moments later I found that I became more and more oriented with physical reality, and I knew that I was going to live beyond the few minutes I had initially hoped for. The glow of my higher mind began to fade into the background as I once again became oriented in my physical body. I did, however, retain the general sense and perspective I'd acquired in death. Soon after this, my friends and family threw a party that took place in North Hills. Even in the dream I found this to be quite random. I woke up after this and immediately wrote everything down just in case I started to forget. Thank you for watching until the end. I really appreciate your time. In my next video I'll be covering the entries that followed these, and as always, if you have any questions you're welcome to comment and I'll either respond directly or cover them in a future video.